Hey guys, Paul here. Don't worry, it's not clickbait, I promise, but this is some really interesting Yu-Gi-Oh news that is a little bit concerning, but also a little bit exciting. And so I wanted to talk about it with you guys and get your opinions on it. Okay, so the news comes to us from Konami's 51st annual shareholder meeting in Japan. Yu-Gi-Oh actually came up as one of the concerns that the shareholders had. And so Konami's president actually had to respond as well. I've got the translations of the question that was asked and also his response to it. This was just with Google Translate, so it might be a little bit shaky, and I'll of course try to provide a little bit of extra context where I can. So the shareholder statement says, regarding Yu-Gi-Oh content, I am concerned that two things may have a negative impact on growth. The first is that we have not been able to successfully acquire new users. New users who started with Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel sometimes give up when trying to start playing Yu-Gi-Oh! In real life. This was the case with a player I actually met at a Yu-Gi-Oh! OCG Duel Monsters, that's what it's fully called in Japan, tournament. Isn't it necessary to consider how to eliminate such cases? Judging from the opinions of players and online players, official Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournaments are often distributed as one-sided matches, leading to a decline in player motivation and a lack of new users entering Yu-Gi-Oh! OCG Duel Monsters. I think it's related to the difficulty. If surrendering, which is currently not allowed by the official rules, was allowed, it will give a rise to a strategy of restarting from the next game, and I think that the appeal of the video will increase, so please consider it. Alright, let's break a couple of things down here really quickly. So basically what they're talking about is that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is having a tough time retaining new people, and so that they feel that might, limit its growth potential. I know that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is very popular in Japan, and I think that what they're saying here is that people start playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Oftentimes through Master Duel, but when they start playing the physical game, they still find themselves very overwhelmed or very confused. They also refer to how Yu-Gi-Oh! Is distributed, and I think here they're talking about videos and live streams being very one-sided and not exciting to watch. In the OCG, players are not allowed to scoop or, concede during games. If your opponent has a huge long 10-minute combo and all the gas is possible in their hand and you have no hand traps to stop it whatsoever, you still have to sit and wait through all of it. It's kind of considered a respect thing. I think it's just sort of a cultural difference. Obviously in the TCG, if that happens, we can just scoop and go to the next game, but they can't. And this person is saying that that can kind of create some very unpleasant viewing experiences for people who know that the game is one-sided and has kind of already been, determined, but they still have to just sit there and kind of be miserable as their opponent just combos off. So to summarize, they want Yu-Gi-Oh! To be more accessible and also more watchable. So next is what Konami's president responded. This is Hideki Hayakawa. Thank you for your valuable opinion. It is a great pity that the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game did not last long after it was launched. I think what he means here is that it's a shame that players were onboarded but did not stay long, like they didn't play for a very long time. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game has been undergoing revisions to the regulations and changes to the rules over time. We have received the opinion that we may not be able to successfully attract new users, but we take it seriously and would like to continue considering different tournament rules so that more customers can enjoy the game. Going forward, we will continue to focus on what kind of playing environment will allow as many customers as possible to enjoy the game for a long time. Also, with regards to the poor appearance of tournament video distribution, we also want people to enjoy playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Of course, but we want them to see it and say it's fun to watch. This has been a very important issue for the past several years. I think it's a valuable opinion. I also think that it is extremely reasonable. So I would like to take the opinions I received back to the company. So, a lot to unpack here. I think a less charitable interpretation of what he said here is, we hear you, we'll think about it, I'll get back to you on that. But I do think that he's being genuine here, and I think that Konami is well aware of these concerns. So clearly Konami knows that Yu-Gi-Oh's got a bit of an accessibility problem and a bit of a watchability problem, and they are, trying to take steps to fix it. Now, like I said, a lot of this applies more so to Japan, but I think a lot of the changes that Konami might make could trickle over to TCG territories. All right, so let's move the conversation over to the TCG. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has been in this really big resurgence lately. YCS events and the World Championship qualifiers have been getting really high attendance, so you can definitely tell that competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Is on the rise. There's a lot of interest and players are definitely going out, playing, and enjoying it. We also have a lot of other really cool things going on, like the 25th anniversary that's been happening, like the new quarter century secret rares, or them re-releasing the Legend of Blue Eyes and Spell Roller packs, Hypeland and other brands making different shirts and accessories, skateboards and stuff. I've seen all kinds of things. But you can't deny that Yu-Gi-Oh! Still has that sort of stigma for being a really difficult game to just play. And it sort of depends on who you ask, right? I'm gonna try not to go full Yugi boomer here, but we all have seen the, person who tries to get into the game and they just find themselves really overwhelmed. Yu-Gi-Oh's got this rep for being hard to learn, hard to play, and I think that not all of it is entirely fair. So I feel that Yu-Gi-Oh's rules are surprisingly easy to pick up and figure out. In fact, they've made some really big strides towards making Yu-Gi-Oh even more easy to understand. If you play Master Duel, you will pretty much learn exactly how effect activations and chain resolutions and all of that stuff works. And problem-solving card text that they implemented like 10 years ago now has done a really great job, I think, in just improving the readability of cards. Even if card text is still really long and the text is really small, at least, that's something. If you're watching this video, you know how chains work, you know what's going on, you've kept up with all the different summoning mechanics, so none of it really surprises you, but you can see how it would just be a little bit overwhelming for somebody to experience in real time. Sure, a tutorial booklet might say, okay, synchro summoning is easy. Tuner, non-tuner, add up levels, make synchro. Against a modern deck, they're going to be doing 2 or 3 synchro summons, 2 or 3 link summons, 2 or 3 Xyz summons, and lots of different combos from the grave and the hand and the banish zone all within one turn. And that, I think, is where stuff can get a little bit much. So I do think Konami's been doing a few nice things to help with the issue. First and foremost, alternative formats. This is something they've actually been embracing, and a lot of people have been asking for it for a really long time. There is, of course, the speed duel format. It's not super popular, but I am a big fan of it. Some less charitable folk might call it Yu-Gi-Oh! And training wheels, but I do think speed duels bring a lot to the table for newbies. It's a really accessible way to play. You only have 3 monster card zones, 3 spell trap card zones, and the skill cards kind of add a bit of a fun anime element to it as well. And if you're not into that, then there's also the Time Wizard formats, supporting things like Edison format and GOAT format. And this has been really popping off. If you've been to any of the recent YCS events or like the North America World Championship qualifier, they had an entire Edison dedicated event, and people love this stuff. That said though, I do have some suggestions that I think Konami could implement. First of all, I really like this new 2-player starter deck product that they recently announced. It's supposed to be this thing that actually contains 2 decks and is meant to teach people how to play with a fully scripted duel. I think this is genius. It's something that, Yu-Gi-Oh! Hasn't really had before. We haven't even had starter decks for like years now, but I think finally having one that is meant to teach, more modern mechanics, which seems like what they're doing here. They're trying to teach you synchro summoning, Xyz summoning. I always feel like starter decks sort of misrepresent Yu-Gi-Oh! Like they'll be like, here, normal summon this vanilla monster and end your turn. But then when you go to a tournament, it's like 50 summons in a turn and a bunch of different chains and effects resolving. So my hope for this is that it kind of is a better representation of what you'll actually get when you go to your card shop and play Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm not entirely sure how the product is going to work or exactly how much it's going to cost, but I think that this is a really great resource for new people, so definitely more of that. I do think Konami needs to have a rulings resource. This is something that I've said for years now. The judge program that Konami has is great. Judges do a good job. I don't mean to undermine their efforts, but I do think that it's hard to actually just understand Yu-Gi-Oh! And sometimes you have questions about card interactions and rulings, and so it would be really good if there was sort of an online resource that you could go to where you can just, find precedents on rulings that have been set. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has this weird thing where like Konami doesn't really like to own rulings. It's just whatever the judge said at a given event. But it would be really great if you could use maybe your smartphone, maybe an app like Yu-Gi-Oh! Neuron perhaps, and look up the card that's giving you trouble. Yu-Gi-Oh! Wikia actually has had this for years, and even though those are unofficial rulings, a lot of players still use them. I think it's crazy that players have to go to Facebook groups or obscure Discord servers or something to just ask for, information about this. That's something that I feel Konami should really be providing. I also think that Yu-Gi-Oh! Needs to do more at the local level to really draw players in and kind of retain them. So something that I saw at my local card shop is that the Pokemon TCG scene has this board. I have no clue what it's called, but there's this board and everybody's names go on it. And you get sort of accomplishments or achievements like in a video game for doing basic and sort of advanced things, like entering a tournament or conducting a trade or bringing a friend to locals for the first time. I think that this would translate super well to Yu-Gi-Oh! Maybe you could even get a little bit granular and have it about building different decks or conducting different summoning types. Sure, there are some logistics that you'd have to work out, but I think that this could be great for just getting people involved in the game and kind of keeping them entertained and encouraging socialization and teaching. I know that Yu-Gi-Oh! Used to have these Yu-Gi-Oh! Day events. I think they still have them. I'm not entirely sure how they work. I know it was supposed to sort of be a thing where, like judges or local sort of card shop employees could teach people how to play. My locals have not had them in ages, or at least when they do, that's not exactly how they work. I mean, I think people just play in a tournament for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Day mat, and that's the end of it. So that's something that Konami would have to work with card shops a little bit more on. They have a small bit of it. Like, I know that they have the Trials of the Pharaoh events. I think that that's something that they do with speed duels, but I haven't really seen that at most card shops. And I know that they've got the Lost Art promotion, which is sort of meant to encourage people to just buy packs in general. If you spend $30, you get a Lost Art card. But I think that we could be doing so much more with this. But it still leaves the elephant in the room of what do you actually do about modern Yu-Gi-Oh? This is a big one because there's a lot with modern Yu-Gi-Oh! It's just kind of a vortex. I mean, if you ask 10 different people, you're going to get 10 different answers on what the exact problem with modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is, right? I mean, some people say it's the, combo decks with the long 10-minute turns. Some people say it's all the different summoning mechanics they've introduced, hand traps, floodgates, everything, right? Just the general power creep of the game. And I don't really have the solution to that, but I do think that maybe what Konami could do is just have ban lists that are, I don't know, a little bit more on the control end. Maybe like, formats that seem to be a little bit slower and more interactive seem to also be the more popular ones. This isn't going to be a ban list discussion. I mean, you guys can talk about what you think, should get hit. I think, though, that with the large card pool that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has and the maturity of the game, it's hard to make any real sweeping changes. So this is probably, while it's the biggest issue, it's also the one that is just the hardest to solve. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I want to hear you guys' opinions on this. What do you think Yu-Gi-Oh! Has to do to kind of like get new players, and what has it got to do to retain new players? We all know the card shop issue right now isn't that people aren't into competitive play, it's more so that we're not getting new blood, we're not getting kids, returning players, that sort of thing. So I want to hear all your suggestions down in the comments, and of course if you want to check out the documents that I was referring to at the beginning of the video, I'll have the links to it. What should Konami be doing? What would you do in this situation? How do you think some of these changes might happen in the OCG, and how might they maybe be translated to the TCG? I'd love to hear all your opinions. And should I do more talking head videos like this? It's a cool one to know. All right, that's gonna be it. I will be reading you guys' comments, definitely responding. You can also come hang out with me over on social media. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, all the places. Subscribe for more Yu-Gi-Oh! It's gonna be it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Fast turn.